Before the first sword was raised and before the first arrow was released, the real battle had already begun inside the human mind. Imagine standing in an ancient army as the ground trembles beneath your feet. War drums echo in the distance. Dust rises into the air, and fear tightens its grip around your chest. Your hands shake, your heart races, and for a single moment you hesitate, only to realize something terrifying. The enemy in front of you may kill you, but the punishment behind you is far worse. In the ancient world, war was not governed by mercy, law, or human rights. It was governed by fear. Fear was discipline, fear was order, fear was power, and punishment was the sharpest weapon of all. Ancient armies survived not through loyalty alone but through absolute obedience, where the greatest crime was not failure but cowardice. To run from battle was to betray every man beside you, and betrayal demanded merciless punishment. One of the most infamous practices was decimation, where soldiers who disobeyed or fled were lined up and every 10th man was chosen by chance, not because he was guilty but because fear required a sacrifice, and the remaining soldiers were forced to execute him, destroying not just a life but the very idea of safety, because once decimation was enforced no one was innocent and no one was protected. The message was clear. Survival depended entirely on obedience. Public beatings followed the same logic, carried out in front of entire units to break the spirit as much as the body. While disgraced soldiers were stripped of weapons, armor, rank, and honor, sometimes forced to sleep outside the safety of the camp where enemies and wild animals lurked, a living symbol of shame and exclusion. In ancient warfare, a soldier's identity was his unit, and to lose it was worse than death, because fear kept formations unbroken, fear kept lines steady, and fear pushed men forward into battle rather than allowing them to face punishment behind them. When battles ended, suffering rarely did, because for prisoners of war capture was often worse than dying on the battlefield. Mercy was considered weakness, and weakness invited rebellion. So captives were treated not as humans but as resources, threats, or warnings. Many were sold into slavery. Men condemned to endless labor building roads, temples, and monuments for the empires that defeated them, while women and children were separated and sold, families erased in a single day, turning survival into a lifetime of chains. Others were executed in mass killings, not out of anger but calculation, because dead prisoners could not rebel and dead enemies could not rise again. Some captives were deliberately mutilated, not to kill them but to ensure they lived without strength, dignity, or honor, returning home as living reminders of defeat, each scar carrying a silent message that resistance brings suffering. These prisoners became walking warnings, and fear spread faster than any army ever could. Ancient wars were not fought only against soldiers but against entire cities, and a city that resisted was not respected but punished. If walls fell after defiance, destruction followed as policy rather than chaos, with homes burned, temples looted, statues destroyed, men killed, and women and children enslaved, all considered a legal reward of victory, sending a message to every other city watching from afar that submission meant survival and resistance meant annihilation. Sometimes entire populations were punished for the actions of a few leaders through collective punishment, while in other cases cities were left standing but slowly broken as crops were burned, wells blocked, and food supplies destroyed, turning hunger into a weapon and starvation into a silent siege where fear waited patiently until collapse arrived without a single battle. Some punishments were designed not to kill but to be remembered, staged publicly in marketplaces, city gates, and main roads where executions were displayed and bodies left visible so every passerby became a witness and every witness became afraid. Humiliation was used as power, with prisoners forced to march through cities stripped of dignity, banners inverted, symbols mocked, identities erased, and in certain cases executions were deliberately prolonged not for justice but for spectacle, because pain was meant to be seen and death was meant to teach. In the ancient world, memory mattered more than mercy, because a punishment witnessed once could prevent 1,000 rebellions. These extreme punishments existed because ancient societies had no prisons, no international law, and no concept of human rights, and authority depended entirely on control while control depended on fear. Rulers believed mercy encouraged rebellion and cruelty ensured obedience. So war was not only about defeating enemies physically, but about destroying hope itself, because once hope died, resistance followed. Fear kept empires alive, And although today we see these punishments as barbaric and inhuman, in the ancient world they were tools of survival that built empires, enforced order, and shaped history. When fear became law, humans became weapons, and punishment became the language of power, not random violence but carefully designed systems meant to terrify societies into submission. This is the legacy of ancient war punishments, not just bloodshed but terror engineered into civilization itself.